Hi everyone. Yeah, I had a question from last session that we didn't have enough time, so I'm gonna send it out here. So my question was related to de English is it demotivation, like the opposite of motivation, right? So the thing is that from when I've been analyzing some behaviors, there's a difference between not having like lack of motivation and like demotivation, like being like triggered to the other side, right? So you don't want to do a behavior because I don't know, you're afraid of something or whatever. So sometimes I'm having a hard time to know where to put that information. So for example, if I want to understand why somebody does this behavior, okay, I understand the motivation of people that do it, and I can use the Octalysis framework. And sometimes I interview people that don't do the behavior, and I try to analyze the what is blocking the behavior. And many times some of the answers are regarding like, I'm afraid of something. I don't want to look like embarrass myself and stuff like that. That seem to be like core drive 5, but it's the opposite, right? It's like the negative of core drive 5. So I remember I heard in some of the videos you talk about like the anti-core drives. I'm not sure if it's the same thing, and if you could maybe explain it a little bit to me. Where can I put that information, because it's definitely useful.
Yes, I was just about to say, hey, yeah, anti-core drives is the answer, or see if someone knows the answer, but you brought up the keyword, so I like that. So I'm just going to go deeper onto it. So for the anti-core drives, kind of like you said, right? We know that everything people do is because of those 8 core drives. If they're not doing your desired actions, then it's an anti-core drive, which means those 8 core drives are motivating people away from what you want them to do. So for instance, I really have a lot of motivation to do this thing, but my friends will think I'm a loser. That's social influence, but that's an anti-core. That social influence, core drive 5, is motivating people away from desired action, right? Or, hey, I want to do this, but actually I'll feel like a loser. I will feel pretty stupid or not smart. So that's anti-core drive 2. Now, a lot of times anti-core drives would be connecting to that CD8 a lot, right? Core drive 8 is you're avoiding something, you're having fear. So there's a big confusion with people using Octalysis. They'll say like, oh yeah, they don't want to do this action, so that's bad. That's core drive 8. It's bad. It's black hat. But they're kind of misunderstanding core drive 8 to the anti-core drive, because if core drive 8 loss and avoidance is the core drive, that means loss and avoidance is making people want to do the desired action. That means I'm so afraid of the consequence if I don't do it. That's why I'll do it, right? But if they said, oh, they don't want to do it because they're afraid of punishment or afraid of whatever, and that's core drive, that technically will be anti-core drive 8. So, or hey, I want to do this if it's against my religion, that's anti-core drive 1, right? So you can identify that, right? So you're the user, and there's the undesired actions, and there's desired. So, okay, there's the user, you're the designer, and everything you want the user to do is a desired action, DA, and uses 8 core drives to motivate them, right? And for everything else that's undesired, basically everything else that's not desired action is usually undesired action. It's the anti-8 core drives. And so whether something's a core drive or anti-core drive, depending on who you are, right? So let's say an example I give sometimes is you are a startup that's trying to recruit someone to leave their big corporate job and join you as a startup. You could use different core drives to try to motivate them. Say, hey, look, this really changes the world, CD1. Hey, there's a lot of autonomy. You could be really creative. So CD3, you could, every day is really different. It's so interesting. CD7, you'd be a team of very dynamic people. CD5, so you should really join us, right? So that's the core drives you deploy. But the person may not want to leave because let's say there's anti-core, like, well, this company I am is one of the most prestigious companies in the world. So it looks great on my resume, core drive 2, there's development accomplishment. And then there's, I do make a very stable, nice income. So there's core drive 4. Oh, and I'm like 7 months away from my stock options vesting or cliff. So there's scarcity, right? And what if I join the startup and it fails? That's core drive 8. So there is that opposite action. But if you're the corporation, your desired action is for them to stay, right? And so that's desired, and the undesired action is for them to leave and join the startup. So suddenly those are flipped around. The, hey, it's prestigious, it's stable, all that stuff is a core drive. The, hey, you get to work with the, every day is so different. It's, all that stuff could be an anti-core drive. Now, of course, both sides would want to improve addressing the anti-core drive. They could flip around to be a strength. That corporations like, well, look, we can give you more autonomy, give you more creative roles, or there's actually bigger impact through the big corporation because everything you do is at scale. 100 million users can use it. Whereas the startup, if you're lucky, if 1 million people touch it, right? And the startup could, say, hey, look, there's no loss and avoidance because the development company, it's prestigious, but it's already on your resume, right? It's on your resume, this big company. Like, what's the difference between being there for 2 years versus like 5 years? You're still the same quality on your resume. But for a startup, if this works, like in 2 years, you'll be able to completely, you could be like this legendary figure in the industry. And lots of, but hey, that's not too risky because, hey, a startup, you'll figure out if it's successful or failure in 2 years. And so, hey, if it fails, just go back to a big company. There's really no risk, right? And so they're constantly debating, fighting between those core drives and anti-core drives. Sometimes the way you can turn it around is, for instance, so I was helping a company that was doing gamifying SEC compliance training for financial firms. And so their customers are big banks, right? And so the big bank usually they don't want to work with startups because it's risky, right? It's like, oh, I could buy your technology and then, next month you die. So that's bad. So they always want, so core drive 8, loss and avoidance is an anti-core drive. And so what they can do is to use that core drive 8 and turn it around from a anti-core drive to a core drive. So they can tell them, hey, look, as a fact, right? Your SEC compliance training is boring. Your employees are really not doing it. They're just checking boxes. They're not going through it carefully. They're not absorbing this. You also know that every day your employees are not compliant. That's risk to the company, right? You can get sued any day. You can get sued every day, right? And so you make them feel like it's actually riskier to not work with a startup than to work with a startup. And so suddenly you're turning that core drive 8 around. Another random casual example I give is, let's say you're at a company party and you want to like convince some guy to like drink some wine, right? And the guy's like, I thank you, I don't drink wine because I became a Christian and so I can't drink wine anymore. So he's a new Christian. And so again, core drive 1, epic, meaning, and calling, right, is the anti-core drive. He believes that his faith, his religion, prevents him from doing the desired action. So sometimes in this case, nothing else matters. Say, hey, you worked hard, you deserve it. Like, doesn't really matter, right? They would say, hey, look, all these other people are drinking. Your coworkers are drinking too. You should do it too. Depending on how strong they are. Usually it doesn't work. Doesn't matter, right? You could say, hey, if you don't drink, you get fired from this job, right? Then it depends on, again, how strong is your faith. Technically, the first thing you want to do is address that epic, meaning, and calling. So, something you could say is, hey, really? I thought Christians could drink. Wasn't like Jesus' first miracle turning like water into wine? And yeah, I thought in the Last Supper, like Jesus poured wine to his disciples saying they should drink it because it's the blood or something. And it's like, oh yeah, that's right. I've never thought about that. And it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure Christians can drink. And I'll tell you what, just take this glass and I promise you I won't give you more. And also, look, other Christian people in the company, they're drinking too. So they drink a little bit. So just why don't you enjoy your time, right? So you first address the anti-core drive, making that the CD1 is not a concern. Then you go with the potential, hey, I a little bit of CD3, like, hey, I'm just take this and I'm not gonna push you further. I'm gonna let you be in control and empower you with your choice. And then also the CD5, like people similar to you. Remember, social norm is always, it can't be generic random people. It has to be people similar to you. So people similar to you are also doing the desired action. So you should do it too. So that would be, again, a random example of thinking about how to manage those core drivers and anti-core drives.
Cool, thank you. Does it make sense to design an anti-octalysis for these anti-core drives, or is it just too much? Is it not necessary?
It could, like, again, the more you do, the more you think, the better your outcome is, right? But as you know, the whole Octalysis process is hefty, so we don't usually put that as a requirement. But there are times where you identify that, hey, look, the anti-core drives, this is why I even have in my slides, right? Desired actions. Sometimes you realize, hey, the anti-core drives are actually the most, like, people already want to do it all day long. So our goal is actually to address those core. And so in your Octalysis brainstorm, you can think about how to remove those anti-core drives. So CD2 is about, instead of they feel stupid, make them feel smart, right? CD5 is like, oh, their friends will think they're a loser. Now, how do we create a design or campaign that will make it look really cool to the friends? So you could kind of merge that into a lot of times removing friction, going back to BJ Fogg stuff, right? Motivation, ability, and prompt/trigger. So ability, you make it easy. Usually you make it easy. It's either to remove the friction, which is the core drive 8, there's less steps, less time, less money, right? So it's addressing anti-core drive 8, or people, because they feel smarter, it's easier, they feel smarter. It doesn't discourage them. So sometimes it's not too hard, but they just feel discouraged. And so you would motivate them more with CD2. Yeah. So it's good that you're thinking about that. And then you can decide how much you want to play with these anti-core drives.
Awesome. Gracias.